Alright, so welcome to a new guide on this channel, and on this occasion is the Moog DFAM. This is not a review, it's a deep dive about the synth. Everything on this guide is in chapters, so if you look at the description or the timeline, you can jump to a section or skip the ones you don't want. If you like this, please like and subscribe, and if you have the money and you want to buy me a coffee just to say thanks, you can. Check the QRs at the screen, or everything is at the description. Alright, so the DFAM is not a traditional drum machine, and yes, you can create percussive sounds, but I'm pretty sure that you will end up using it in different ways. First, we need to learn how everything works right here in the panel without patching anything. Once you understand this, all of this is going to be really simple. So first, the first part of this guide is going to be about the panel. And then we're going to go one by one, just covering all the ins and the outs. And like I said before, everything is time coded. So take a look at the timeline or the description, and you have all the chapters for this. Alright, so we need to start with the VCOs, and first of all, make sure that you have the same configuration, the same knob position I have right here on my, on this screen. And we need to talk about this, this is the main start. Now, still going right here to the sequencer, playing run and stop, we'll start playing the sequencer, and right here you have the tempo, you can go faster and you can go slower. I'm pretty sure you already know about this. Now still, you have the trigger, and trigger, what it does is going to look to whatever step you are, and then it's going to trigger it. So if you're standing on this one, you're going to be able to hear what it's doing. If you go to advanced, it's going to move on to the next step, and if you play it, you're going to be able to hear. Now, of course, all of this makes sense when we go through the sequencer section, and we take a look to what the pitch and the velocity, will do. But right now, we need to focus on the VCOs that we have right here. We're going to get back to this later. So both oscillators, they can do a wave shape, and they can only do square and triangle. And you can see it right here. If I go to triangle, we get a triangle. If I go to square, we get a square. Right here, you have the volume of the VCO and the VCO2 going up on both. It's going to give you that. Now notice they are a little bit detuned. So this is the tuning control. Now you need to notice that the tuning control is in hertz, it's free. So it's not on semitones or octaves. So you can sweep the whole range all the way up where only cats can hear, and then go all the way down until you get to, let me just go down in volume, to LFO rates. So yeah, it goes super slow. So you could assume that you can use a VCO as an oscillator using the patch bay. But still, I'm gonna go up in volume, and I'm gonna try to put them almost on the same spot. So notice that now they are pretty tuned, let's say. The same spot. So this controls the pitch, the frequency. Now, you also have a noise generator. If I go down in volume of the VCOs, we get nothing, but we get just a noise generator. Just noise. Also notice that it says external level. So this means something about the patch bay. If we connect something here, we are going to be disregarding the noise, and we can use this attenuator to control something else. Of course, we're going to talk about this later. But for now, I'm just going to go to the number one. All right. So this is the first thing. You control the frequency, the volume, and then which waveform you want to use. Now, in this synthesizer, modulation is super important. The first type of modulation is going to be pitch modulation, and these are the controls. Now, to do pitch modulation, you need to decide how much you want to do, how much you want to pitch modulate, and what is the envelope. You need an envelope to do the modulation. So this has an internal envelope, of course, and this is the first envelope. Right here, you will be deciding how much you want to modulate the pitch, which is going to be the frequency. So VCO EG amount is that. You can go, if you're standing on 50%, it means that you're not doing anything. For now, I'm just going to be playing it. And go slow in tempo so we can really hear this. If I go up, you're going to be modulating this control up just like that, or something like that. So if I go up, can you hear the sweep? Yeah. It's just doing pitch modulation. It goes really up and then down, back. And it's super, super fast. And even if I go slower, you're going to be able to hear it. Now, you can go to positives, which means that it's going to be going first, starting up in pitch right here, and then it's going to go down. But if I go to the other side, it's the other way around. You starts down in pitch and then goes up to whatever we have right here. If I go up in frequency, it's a little bit more obvious. It's going down, starts down, and then goes up. So this is how much, this control is how much pitch modulation we do if we want to do any. Now still, you need to notice that the modulation, the pitch modulation, it's super, super fast. What if I wanted to make it a little bit slower? Well, this is the decay of the envelope that is controlling the pitch modulation. If I go up on the decay, now the modulation is super obvious, right? As a decay, it's super slow. If I go slower on the, on the sequencer, you can hear how it's being modulated. If I go to the other side, remember, is the opposite instruction. It starts down and goes up. So if you are going up, really up on the decay, it's just super slow. It depends on what you want to do, which sound you want to get. But you control the decay with this one. Again, if you don't want to do pitch modulation, you stay right to center and it will, stop doing it. We can do the same pitch modulation for the oscillator number 2. I'm going to be playing it, and right now, notice we are using just the number 1, sorry. If I go on the number 2, go up, we get something like that. So maybe I want to do some pitch modulation on the number 1 and not on the number 2, or maybe on the number 2, I'm going to be modulating the frequency in a different fashion. Now, of course, it's super slow. It just sounds a little bit weird, but as you go up and you start messing with these controls, it's gonna, give you different tones. You just need to experiment. The synthesizer doesn't really work if you don't want to experiment and to move the knobs. That's how it works with this one. But this is what we can do, right? So we can select the frequency, the oscillator, the level, and then pitch modulation with the envelope that we have right here. And we can select how, the decay is, if it's super short or it's super slow. Okay, so this is what the oscillators can do. Now we have more things. We need to talk about this. We're going to do it in a second. It says sec and then pitch and then mod. So this is talking about the sequence, and it's talking about the attenuators that you have right here. All of them, they will do some kind of pitch modulation. They will output a voltage, and they will just do some modulation to whatever frequency. This is why right now it's an off. If I play it and I start moving these controls, nothing happens. And it's because we have it in off. So we are choosing not to do pitch modulation with this. So again, that's how it works. Now you have other options. You can go to 1 and 2, and you're going to be modulating both oscillators. Notice that the pitch goes up and down. This is what we can do with this one, with the pitch row. Or we can go all the way down, and the only one that's being affected is the VCO number 2, which is this one. And again, we can create really cool sounds. If I go up on this one, notice that this one is not moving. This is the one that is moving. Now, one thing that you need to know, if I go to off, to the center, you need to know that whenever we run the sequence, the velocity, it's not tied to anything. It will work by default. If I go to this control and go down, notice that we get no sound. So we get no volume out of this. But if I go up past the 50%, it's gonna get louder, so we get kind of an accent. And this is not something that we can disconnect from the main panel. We can do something about it from the patch bay, but not from the main panel. Let's begin with the hard sync. Right now, it's completely off, so by going up, you're going to be turning on the hard sync, and what it does is going to make the oscillator 2 be synced to the number 1. And if you think about this, the 1 is the master, and the 1 is the slave. The frequency of the 2 is going to be restarting and just following whatever the number 1 does. And this is a very common deal, hard sync on a lot of synthesizers. There's always a way of syncing. Now, if I play it, we get a sound like this, and notice that the hard sync is on. So when you're standing on the same waveform, the same pitch, you're not doing modulation, everything's just the same between, oscillator 1 and 2, you're not doing anything. The fun starts to happen when you start to deviate both oscillators. So if I start changing the frequency, then we get the hard sync. Now remember that the number 2 is the slave, so if I change the pitch, it will not change tune, right? It will not detune. It's just adjusting to whatever this does. This one is the one that is controlling the tune. And remember that the AGs that we have right here is they're all about pitch modulation, so we can use pitch modulation and get cool sounds. Same thing with this one. Alright, so maybe it's just a little bit too bright. So this is what we can do with the hard sync. Now always remember that separating both oscillators is what it's gonna give you the cool sound. Alright, if I turn it off, we are back to normal. The other type of modulation that you get is going to be the 1-2 FM amount. And if you take a close look, it's going to say 1 going to the 2 FM amount. So it means that the oscillator number 1 is going to be frequency modulating the oscillator number 2, right? So it's not, the 2 is synced to the 1 and so on. So with this one, we do frequency modulation. If you're all the way down, whatever we do right here will not affect the number 2. As you keep going up, you start getting that frequency modulation at FM. Now, you need to remember, just like the sync, that if you're standing on the same envelope, the same shape, the same everything, you're just not gonna get the cool sound. You need to start to separate. You need to separate the oscillators, just to get, a cool sound. Even if we do. This is something super cool, because remember that all of this right here is about modulation, so we could do a little bit of this and we are going to be getting a different sound. We can even go to the sequencer and start getting something like that. And remember, we can only do VCO number 2 and you're going to be getting again a different sound. So like I said, this is a very cool synthesizer. It's not super hard to use, it's very simple to use. But it gives you things that, maybe you wouldn't do on a normal, synthesizer. Really, really cool. But this is what we can do with the FM mount. If I go all the way up, we get this. If I go down, it just gets duller, right? A little bit more tasty for me. All right. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the filter. It's a pretty simple filter. I'm going to be playing the sequence, and I know it sounds pretty harsh. As I keep going down to the cutoff, we are going to be cutting the higher frequencies. It's a 4-pole, 24 dBs per octave. And then we get the resonance, and as you could assume, is a Moog type of synthesizer, right? So you get that resonance. And as we go up, of course, it's a lighter filter. We go down on the lower frequencies. This is how it works. We can use it in low pass or we can use high pass. So we are going to be chopping, the lower frequencies. Right? Alright, so again, this is what it can do by default. I'm going to stand around there. On all synthesizers, pretty much we always get a way of modulating the cutoff control, right? We are going to be going up and down every time that we play a key, or, we just modulate it. These are the controls. So the EG amount is how much modulation we apply to the cutoff. Going up, it means that it will take the cutoff and go up and then down. But it's doing it every time the synthesizer triggers. If I do it manually, it's going to be like that. So this is the second EG that you get on the synthesizer. The first one is about the pitch. The second one is about the cutoff. If you go all the way up, it's doing max, but the instruction is positive. It means that it goes from here and up, but you can use it negatively. And notice that the sounds just a little bit different now. Now, one thing that you need to notice, I'm going to go all the way up. Now it sounds very plucky. And it's because the envelopes are super short. That's why you have the decay, just like we have right here. Going up on the decay is gonna make it decay a little bit slower. I mean the EG. So now we have a different type of sound. Just like the pitch we did right there. Super plucky, not so plucky. Right? So cool. Now, depends on what you're doing. You're going to need to fine tune all of these controls. This is just what you need to do. Right. Now, the next thing, and for now, I'm just going to leave it around there and do no modulation. If you're standing right at center, it means that you're not doing EG. Now, the other thing is going to be the noise-VCF mod. And it says noise because it's going to use noise as a modulation source for the cutoff. And if it's not using noise, it's going to use something else. What something else? Well, that depends because we need to connect something else like an LFO or whatever other source, and it's going to be disregarding the noise and taking whatever we use on the VCF mod. But we're going to talk about that later. I'm going to be playing this, go down on the cutoff. If I go up on this control, we can hear the noise doing its job. It's using noise to modulate the cutoff, right? And we get noisy sound because we are using noise. Makes sense. Right. If you go all the way up, it's just maybe a little bit too aggressive. I like to use it like that. Maybe do a little bit of VCF amount. Something like that. I'm going to go to defaults, and now we need to talk about the remaining parts. We covered pretty much everything. We need to talk about the VCA and then the sequence. Okay, so the VCA. So this is volume. It's the voltage control amplifier. That's what it means. And again, it's volume, and volume is just volume. If I play it and go down in volume, we just get nothing. And if I go up, it just gets, louder. This has a VCA, and this, it has a G. So it's an envelope generator, and this is the third envelope that we have on the synthesizer. It's the pitch, then we have the filters, and now we have the EG that controls the volume that goes out. So, just like the other ones, we have a decay, and notice that now it's a pattern. We have a decay on this one, a decay on that, on the cutoff, and a decay on the pitch. So, the EG can work on a fast or slow way. Now still, the decay matters. If I go down on this one, it's going to be just like we did before with the other one. It's just super plucky sound. If I open it all the way, it's like we are not even playing or a key, different steps. We are just, holding a key. So this is the, the VCA. So right now it's fast. It means that the envelopes are fast. But then you have a slow, and you could assume, okay, so this is going to be a slow decay and a fast decay. Well, not really. If I go to slow, notice how it sounds. And I'm going to go down in tempo so we can really hear this, and I'm going to go up in volume. So what can you notice? So when we are on fast, the transient, that as soon as it goes to the next step on the sequence, the sound, the notes, just super fast. We get a hard transient. Because, again, fast, the attack is super fast. Going too slow, it means that now the attack is slow. So we get a ramping up every time that we play a note. Depends on the decay, it's just going to be a little bit more obvious or not, but still, we have a slow attack. So slow attack and fast attack. Depends on what you want to do. You might want to switch it here, want to switch it here. And that's the complete VCA. And yeah, I know, it's just very simple. It is what it is. Okay, so let's do the sequence. And when we are done with this, the whole panel is complete. And we need to go to all the ins and the outs that we have right here. If I play this, the sequencer, it's again very straightforward, just like the rest of the synthesizer once you get to know it. Run, stop, it's gonna run, it's gonna stop, running it. If you stop it, it's gonna stop whatever the playback is. Now still, you can trigger it manually, just like we did before, and this is very useful because maybe I'm going to be doing some pitch modulation in this. I'm going to be modulating the pitch, and now I know that right here, it's going to sound like that. But if I play the sequence and I'm going fast in tempo, maybe it's just going to be a little bit hard when you start making, the crazy changes. So a way to, just audition this is going to be by triggering and just fine-tuning whatever is that you're doing right here. And whenever you want to advance, you go to the next one, you audition, you go to the next one, and this is the edit mode of the sequence. You just keep advancing and just fine-tuning whatever it is that you want. And then once you're done, you just play the sequence. Now, these knobs are very sensitive, so you might want to use this if you really care about all the tuning and that. You don't want to go really experimental. You will need to use a tuner pedal, maybe, just to see whatever it is that you're doing right here. And remember that the velocities are super sensitive as well. If I'm going to go up in volume and then down, just gonna do it. And we get an accent, almost like an accent. Right, so this is how the sequencer works. And I know it's very simple, right? And it's because it is. There's nothing else I need to show you right here. Everything else is going to be through the ins and outs. Now still, if you don't want to use the ins and the outs, this synthesizer is just fantastic. It's an inspiration machine. You can create really cool sounds. Just, by moving around the controls, you can again create really cool sounds. It's super fun to play with. That's my opinion. It depends on what you want to do, of course. It depends on your style. But it all depends on how much you want to spend fooling around with this. Not twisting knobs, experimenting, and using effects like pedals or whatever. It's just not going to work. You will not love this synthesizer. Alright, so let's start with the ins and the outs that we have right here. Of course, all the ins are going to be the ones that have no background, and the ones with the backgrounds are going to be outs. And of course, you cannot connect ins to ins. You can only connect outs to ins or ins to outs. I'm going to start with the pitch out, with this one, the one that we have right here. So this is the out of each knob of the pitch section of the sequencer that we have right here. If I stay on step 1, this one, whatever I do here, this is going to be outputting some kind of voltage. So this instruction of this knob is going to go to the pitch out that we have here. By default, the pitch section, all the different knobs on the sequencers, is going to be hardwired to the sequence pitch mod, right? Oscillator 1 or oscillator 2. This is what it does by default. But what we can do, we can connect the outs, because again, this is going to be outputting that instruction from here, and we can connect it to someplace else and use these knobs as a modulation source. Now, these knobs, what they do, they will output from -5 volts to +5. Now, where can we test all of this? Right here, it says noise level. Maybe we can test it right there. So noise level is going to be this knob. It's going to be the volume of the noise. So maybe we can go up and down in noise in a sequence fashion. I'm going to go from the pitch out, and I'm going to go to the noise level. And I'm going to be going down on the oscillator 2 level. I'm going to go down on all the different levels that we have. And I'm going to start playing this. Now, remember that the controls, these knobs, the pitch knobs, they will output from -5 to +5 in terms of voltage. This control, the noise level, takes from 0 to 5. So if you're doing less, it means that we are going into full silence. We need to go here over 50% in order to get something. And only when we get that, we are going to be starting to get the noise. Maybe I can go a little bit faster and down in volume. So this is what we do. We are connecting, taking the instruction from the pitch and the knobs that we have right here, and we are going up in the volume of the noise. Now still, this noise will affect it, right? I go all the way to silence. We start from full silence and all the way up right here and here and here and here. Now remember, if you want to check how much you're doing, you need to go to trigger and see if you're doing something there, and then maybe fine tune it. And the knobs, the tiny little knobs are super responsive. So it's something that you need to do with the synthesizer. Maybe it's too loud here. And right now we have all the oscillators off. Maybe we can turn something like that off, and we get something cool, right? All right. So again, we can take whatever we have on the pitch and use it as a modulation for something else, and in this case, it's going to be the noise level. So we know that the pitch is going to take the outs of whatever we have right here on this the tiny little knobs. What the velocity will do, it will do the same thing, but it's going to do it with this knobs. But there's a tiny little difference. On the pitch knobs, they will output from -5 to +5. But the velocity knobs will output from 0 to +5. So it's a little bit different. And we're going to do the same trick just to, to prove that this works. I'm going to take the velocity out and I'm going to go to the noise level. Just like we did before, I'm going to go all the way down on the VCOs and all the way down on the noise. I'm going to be playing this. And notice that we get it. If I disconnect this, we get nothing. Now, there's a thing that you need to know, is that the velocity knobs, whatever we do right here, is hardwired to the volume, right? So if I go up on this one, it's going to go up in volume. It's going to affect how it goes out, but it will always also affect the noise. Now, there's a way we can disconnect or have a hardwired velocity and just disregard this tiny little knobs for the velocity. But we are not there yet. All right, so now we understand some ins and some outs, and now everything is going to be easier because we can use the velocity and the pitch, whatever we have right here, to modulate different parts of the synthesizer. Now we need to talk about the VCF mod and the 1-2 FM amount. It's going to be this control and this control. So by default, hardwired is going to be the noise. I'm going to be playing the sequence, and if I go up on this one, noise is going to affect the cutoff. Now we already know this, we talked about this. So what if I don't want to use noise as a modulation source? I want to use something else. Well, the in is going to be right here, VCF Mod. Now if I play it, notice that it's doing the noise. Now I'm going to be connecting something to VCF Mod, and notice what happens. And right now I have this disconnected. So whenever we connect something to the in, it's removing or disregarding whatever we use by default to do that modulation. Right, so I want to use something. What can we use? So we already know that we can use the pitch. So I'm going to be going to pitch, and remember that this outputs, and I'm going to go all the way down to this control, from -5 to +5. I'm going to be playing this, and I'm going to be fooling around with the pitch, because this is what we are using as a modulation source. And I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go up, but notice that nothing happens. It is because when we go through here, this knob, it's still working as an attenuator. So if it's all the way down, we are not doing any modulation to the cutoff. We need to decide how much of whatever modulation that we are doing we want to use. If I go up, we get it. This is what we are doing with these tiny little knobs. If I go down, go up, we can do all sorts of things. That's the plan. Right? If I disconnect it, we use noise or we use an external modulation. Now the input for 1-2 FM amount is going to be right here. And we're going to do the same example. I'm going to take the pitch and I'm going to be going to 1 and 2 FM amounts. And remember that all of this is just like this, cutoff open, and we are not doing any kind of modulation to the cutoff. Now I'm using the oscillator number 1, and this is FM, so we are going to need the other one as well. And this is doing it. I'm going to go up in volume. Can you hear it? Maybe if I go brighter, we are getting it. And maybe I'm going to be a little bit obvious. I'm going to go down, up, and something like that, so we can really notice the difference. So we are doing it. If I disconnect it, it sounds different. Now, if I go up on the FM amount, we affect it more. Now remember, changing the frequencies is going to make a difference. Now when you're working with this, whatever we do on the envelopes will affect whatever modulation that we do. So again, it's something there that you need to fool around. You need to fool around with the synthesizer. It's just the way it is. Alright, super cool. Alright, so this is what we do, just like we did with the noise. We go through the ins and we decide how much we want to do. Now it's time for the VCA CV in. It's going to be that one. It's going to be the amp section. If I play the sequence, and maybe I'm going to go to oscillator number 1 because it's going to go really loud. Now if I connect something right here, nothing happens. Now we are not connecting this to anything. Now if I touch it, and I recommend this for you to not do it at home, it's going to go loud, or it's just going to chop it. Right? But this is what I'm doing sometimes. But notice that the sequence is keep going. So I'm fooling around with this. Now, you should not do this. I'm just giving you an example. So how it works right here is that the envelope is always listening for an instruction, which is going to be, in this case, the EG. When I touch it with my finger, I'm giving it some kind of a voltage. This voltage will alter how it sounds, or it would mess with the volume of the EEG, the amplitude of the EG. That's why when I touch the negative, it's not doing anything. When I touch the tip, it's super loud. Now I'm going to use the pitch as an example, something that we know. Pitch out to the CV in. And I'm going to be putting all of them at center. And as soon as I do this, notice that something happens. We get a background sound. If I disconnect it, it goes silent. If I plug it in, it keeps up. So it's maintaining, or it's sustaining, or keeping, in this case, the envelopes of the amp opened. And it's because, by default, this is outputting some kind of voltage. If I go down, we go to full silence. And as we cross the 0 volts, it's going to go louder. But notice it stays right there. If I advanced, it's going to take whatever information that we do right there on the different sections, and then we get it. And if you think about this is something very similar to the velocity controls. Now I'm going to be playing this, and I'm going to go down the volume because it's just super loud right now. So again, what we do right here, we output some kind of instruction, and it's going to make it go up in volume, and we can go really up and down with the pitch knobs, because that's what we are using as an instruction. But you need to take into account that whatever voltage that you're putting right here is going to get stuck at that voltage when you stop the sequencer, or when you stop on that step, unless you go to full silence. If you think about, let me just disconnect. If you think about this is something that you can use to your advantage. But some of the ins and outs are better used with a different synthesizer, right? Just pairing this synth with a different one. Now, on this guide, I'm trying to avoid using external synths because maybe you don't have one. This is maybe your first synthesizer. So all the examples I'm doing right here are with the ins and outs that we have right here. If I get to a point where I need to give you a very specific example, I'm going to bring a different synthesizer, but for now, I'm only going to be using the ins and outs of this synth. Right, so now it's time to talk about the trigger out and the trigger in. This is going to be the trigger out, and this one is going to be the trigger in. Like I said before, this is something that we could use with an external synthesizer. Now the trigger is in charge of triggering all the different envelopes, the 3 envelopes that we have on the synthesizer. That's why when I play the trigger, we get some kind of something. It's opening and closing and just triggering the envelopes. It's telling them to start doing their job. And then, the envelopes close, and we get something like this. Same thing when we run the sequence. On each step, we are triggering all the 3 envelopes that we have right here. I'm going to be connecting something to the trigger out. So this trigger is whatever the synthesizer is doing when we trigger. The instruction of going and triggering on each step is going out right here. Now, I could connect this to a different synthesizer. That would be, the main idea. Now still, you can use the trigger out to something else. And I'm going to be going down, maybe I'm going to be stopping this, and I'm going to go to the VCA CV. Remember that when we go to this one, we can go up in loudness. And if I trigger, notice that we get a pretty harsh, it's a super harsh transient. It's super aggressive at the beginning. And this is because the trigger is going to be a pulse. It's a very short instruction, and it's around 1 ms in width. So it's super short. And this is what a trigger does. It's not a gate, it's a trigger. That's why when we trigger, when I play this, we can hear that pulsating sound. And if I play the sequence, every time that we go to a step, it's going to do that trigger. Again, I'm just trying to teach you how this works. If you already know what a trigger is, you know this. So the trigger is maybe something better used with an external synthesizer. You take the trigger out, you plug it into something else that needs to trigger, and you're going to be triggering whatever other synth with whatever you do on the sequence or whenever you play the button. Now then you have the trigger in, and it's the same idea but backwards. What if you wanted to trigger this synthesizer with maybe an external synthesizer? Well, you go to the trigger in, and you go to your other synth, and you trigger the synthesizer with whatever you do right here. Now the trigger in, it can take from 0 to a 5-volt pulse or gate signal, and it can take up to 10. Is 10 volts tolerant? So if I do something like this, at some point, it's going to take that voltage and it's going to trigger. Now, of course, you should be connecting this maybe to a different synthesizer to get something else to trigger this synth. In this case, you know what? I'm going to be doing something cool. I'm going to be going right here. It says VCO1 and then VCO2. I'm going to connect it to the VCO2 and go down in volume. Notice what we get. It's just staying open. Now the VCOs, remember, we can control the frequency and we can go down to LFO rates. Since I'm using a pulse, this is outputting voltage, and now we are just triggering all the different envelopes with an LFO, which is the sequencer, the VCO2. If I go faster, it's re-triggering the envelopes with the LFO. But again, you could use this maybe with an LFO of a different synthesizer or whatever. You can, even use it right here. It's going to be a little bit weird, but you can. Right, so now it's time to talk about the velocity in. We already know the velocity out, which is going to be everything that we have right here on the sequencer. Now, the velocity in is going to be the one that controls whatever we do in terms of velocity with the knobs. So if I start a sequence, I'm going to be starting it, and I'm going to be connecting something to the velocity. And notice that it goes quiet. If I move the knobs, now maybe I go all the way up and down and do something like that, nothing is happening. And it's because when we connect something to the velocity in, we are just severing that connection. And the knobs that we have right here are not in charge of controlling whatever we do in terms of velocity. And I'm going to give you a warning, you should not do this at home. I'm going to give you an example. If I touch this with my finger and I touch the tip, it's going to go super loud. So I'm giving some kind of voltage, right? So this is what we do. All right, so let me just stop it. So what we can do with this one, if we connect some other source, we can control the velocity. And just to give you an example, we can use the oscillator as an LFO. I'm going to be connecting the VCO2, and we are going out from the VCO2 to the velocity in. Now, the velocity takes from 0 to 5 volts. And I'm going to be playing this. And notice that what happens. This is, of course, really loud. I'm going to go down in volume. So I'm going to go down. I'm just using the oscillator number 1, and the 2 is all the way down. And I'm going to go down to to LFO rates. And notice that sometimes we get whatever is going on in the sequence, but sometimes it's going full silence. And it's because I'm using a square. So the square is going to be on, and then it's going to be off, on and off. It's full voltage, nothing, full and nothing. That's why this velocity is getting the instruction that sometimes it needs to be all the way up and sometimes all the way down. So we get, sometimes full volume, full loudness, and nothing. So the most important takeaway from this is that when you connect something to the velocity in, what you do, you are severing the hardwired connection that you get to the knobs on the sequencer. So I could take maybe a different synthesizer and connect to the velocity in, and maybe use an attenuator from a different synth and set it to a fixed value in terms of velocity. Or just to give you an idea, I could use the trigger, right? If I'm not using the trigger for something else, remember that the trigger is going to be triggering on each of the steps, but it's always the same volts. It's always the same voltage. So it's going to keep the velocity consistent on all the steps. Now it's going to be super loud. But again, the main idea is that the velocity knobs, they don't do anything now. We can use them to do something else. I'm going to go out of the velocity right? Velocity out is going to be all of these knobs that we have right here. And now we can use it to modulate something else. What can we modulate? Well, whatever is that you want. I'm going to go to VCF Mod. This is going to be this knob, and we are going to be modulating the cutoff. So if I do something like this, and I'm going to be playing it, let's say we get it. Now, of course, this is the attenuator. I'm going to go full up, so we get full of whatever we do right here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to be doing something like that. All right, so we get from almost nothing, and we go up. From nothing to all the way up. Now, of course, you can do maybe combinations and get something more rhythmical if you wanted to. That's the main plan. But now again, the main idea is that now maybe you can connect something or use something else with these knobs, right? You can modulate something else with these knobs. That's the plan, right? Okay, so VCO1 out and VCO2 out. And we already used an example with this. So this is the out of the oscillators that we have right here. And everything that we do before, like the EG amount, decay, and everything else, sync and FM, is going to affect whatever that comes out from the 1 and the 2 before going to the filters. So we can use the out of the 1 or the 2 as a modulation source, or maybe we can connect the out from here and go to a different synthesizer, maybe going to the number 1, and take the sound that comes out from the number 1 and maybe go to, again, a different synth, or use it, again, as a modulation source. You can use a square, or you can use a triangle, just like we did before. And again, I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to go to VCO2. I'm going to connect it right here, and I'm going to be using it as an LFO, just like we did before. And maybe we can modulate instead of using it noise, we can do the modulation with an LFO. And I'm going to go to VCF Mod, and I'm going to set the velocity to almost 50%, which is default. I'm going to be playing this. We have some cutoff. I'm going to be going up, and now we are using, maybe go up in volume. We are using the LFO as a modulation source. Now I'm using a pulse, so it's gonna be like on and off type of thing. I'm gonna be using a triangle, and now we get it. Maybe up on the decay and up on this decay. Right, so again, we are using the oscillator as an LFO source. If I go faster, you can really notice it. Right, because at this point you get the idea. All right, so as we have the outs of the VCO1 and 2, we have the ins of the VCO1 and 2, but it says CV. So when it says CV, in this case, it's talking about the frequency that we have on the oscillators. So we can take whatever other thing and connect it to 1 and 2, and it's going to be modulating the frequency. Now, the input of VCO1 CV and VCO CV, they will take 1 volt per octave. What the F do I mean with this? It means that if I connect something maybe to, I don't know, CVO1 or 2, we need to provide an instruction. And if I provide 1 volt, the pitch or the frequency is going to go up or down 1 octave. If I do plus 1 volts, it's going to be 1 octave. If I do 2 volts, plus 2 volts is going to be 2 octaves. If I do 3, it's going to be 3 octaves. If I do 5, it's going to be 5 octaves. I believe you get the idea. Let's just, again, create an example. I'm going to be going just like we did before. I'm going to disconnect the velocity so we can use the knobs that we have right here at the bottom. I'm going to go to trigger and go to the VCO1 CV. And for this example, I'm just going to be using the VCO1. I'm going to go down in volume, and if I play it, it's going to be like this. Now, the plan is to modulate the frequency, and that's what we are doing. That's why we get that sound. All right, so I'm cutting a lot of frequencies, but I'm going to keep it around there. Now, remember that the velocity knobs, they will output from 0 to 5 volts. So if I go all the way to nothing on the velocity knobs, because that's what we are using, and I play it, and I'm going to go down in volume because, again, it's super loud, we are getting nothing. But if I move this, it's going to start modulating the frequency. And what I want to do, I want to start at some point and go up. I'm cutting a lot of frequency so it's not super annoying because it's super bright. But this is what we are doing. We are taking whatever instruction and modulating the frequency. Now, always remember that whatever we do right here, it will affect the oscillator. You can use whatever other source. I'm using this one that goes from 0 to 5, but the ins of the VCO1 and the 2, they can take from minus 5 volts up to plus 5 volts. So you can go down in frequency, minus, or you can go positive, you can go up in frequency, you can go up in pitch. All right, so VCA, VCF, VCO decay in. If we take a look right here, we can see the VCA decay, VCF decay, and the VCO decay. And all of them are ins. At this point, all of this should be very simple. Now, we have controls for the decay of all of these three things. We have the VCA decay, we have the VCF decay, and right there at the top, we have the VCO decay. So when we input something to them, what we are doing, we are affecting, how they work. And again, at this point, all of this should be very obvious, but still, I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to be reusing the same example that we did before. I'm going to use the velocity knobs to do some kind of a modulation to provide an instruction. We want to modulate this knob. I'm going to start with the VCA decay. So I'm going to maybe go all the way down, and I'm going to use the velocity knobs. I'm going to patch in the velocity out, and I'm going to go to the velocity, the VCA decay in. If I play it, that is how it sounds. So we start super close, and we, as we go up on the sequence, we open it more and more and more. I'm trying to, again, make this, all of this just super obvious. Start closed, and if I go up, down in tempo, it's going to be super obvious. As we go through each step, it's just going to be affecting the decay, and it's going to open it more and more and more. Now, the position of this knob will affect whatever it is that we do right here, because it's going to start right there. All right. Again, this is what we can do. We can do the same thing for the other ones. Maybe I'm going to be putting the decay right there, and I'm going to disconnect this one right here. We have the VCF decay. I'm going to be connecting to that one, and I'm going to go down on the decay, but we need to do some kind of a modulation to the cutoff. And notice that it goes to the steps. It's going to keep opening more and more until we start over. It's the plan. And it's the same thing with the VCO decay. I feel like I don't need to provide an example for this because it's just the same idea. And if I go up, it's just going to be a little bit more fun. Right? Super cool. All right. Then we have the VCA, the VCF, and the VCO EG out. Just like we have the outputs of the oscillators and all the other outputs, what they do, they will output an instruction. And on the synthesizer, we have 3 envelopes. So whatever we output from here is whatever the 3 envelopes are going to be doing. And again, I shouldn't be providing an example because if you followed or you watched this guide, this should be very simple. But still, maybe I'm going to go to VCA, EG, and it's going to be this one, right? We are using the fast, and the decay, it's almost in 50%. So now, whatever it happens right here on this envelope is going to be outputted to here. And it's going to be from 0 all the way up to 8 volts. So maybe we can go to noise level just to, to make it super obvious. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to go down in volume of the oscillator. So we have pretty much nothing, and I'm going to be playing it. Notice that we get something. Maybe I'm going to go up in volume. If I go down on the decay, it messes, of course, with everything, including the amp. If I disconnect it, maybe I'm going to go down so it's a little bit obvious. Notice that we get nothing. So with the envelope, we are just influencing whatever we have right here. And it's pretty much the same thing with the other ones. So let me do something. I'm going to disconnect it again, and I'm going to go to the VCF EG. All right, so it's going to be this one, the one that we have right here. And maybe I can do something like the VCO CV. I can modulate the frequency of the oscillator number 1. And whatever we are doing right here on this oscillator, on this EG, is going to modulate the frequency. And notice that that is what is going on. I'm not doing any modulation right here. Alright, so again, we are using the envelope of something to modulate something else. Alright, if I go to the VCO EG, it's the same idea, and we can do the same example than before. Maybe go to noise level. We can hear the noise. If I go all the way down, we get it. If I disconnect it, we get nothing. And again, whatever is that we do right here is going to affect. This is a little bit more useful than using the VCA, because when we use the VCA, when we go down at the decay, we are just going down in loudness. But this one, we can freely open it up and just close it. So again, we use the envelope of something to modulate something else. Okay, so maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't, but we just covered almost all the ins and outs. We have a couple more to go. Okay, so let's finish with this. We have the external audio and the VCA out. So this one is going to be the VCA out. Now the screen is a little bit small because I'm going to be using external gear in this case. And then you have the external audio out, which is going to be around here, is this one. Now the VCA out is the audio output. So you can connect this to maybe a different synthesizer and use the out of whatever comes out of this synth and plug it into the other synth or maybe a mixer or whatever it is that you want to do. And just, to prove this, I'm going to be disconnecting the main out that you have at the back, and I'm going to be connecting an adapter right here, and I'm just going to be connecting this right here. And if I play it, we get it, right? It's just the out. So you might still use the out, the back to do something else, but this can go maybe to a different synthesizer and you can use it that way. All right, so then you have the external audio in. Now this lets you patch in external audio sources. So I could connect maybe a synthesizer like this one, or maybe a Mother 32, or the other Moog synthesizers. But again, you can go into the external audio. I'm going to connect it right here, and I'm going to be connecting to the out of whatever that this one outputs, which is going to be this one, right? Now, in the case of this synthesizer, the Roland, it's not super loud. Now, this is why you can see noise and external level on this knob. This controls the volume. So if we plug in something to the external audio in, we are disconnecting the noise. We cannot use noise anymore. But I can go up to the external level, and now we are listening to whatever I do on the other synthesizer. Now on the Roland, I have a sequence. I'm going to be playing the sequence, and I'm going to go down on all the oscillators, and I want to get just what I get in this one. And I'm going to be playing the sequence. Notice that we get it, and it's super low in volume. So I'm getting the output of the whatever sequence the Roland's doing going in, but it is going through the full signal path. So using the cutoff is going to affect it. Just like, we use the resonance and everything else, or the VCA. But yeah, this is how it works. All right. Now, in conclusion, you can take maybe a different synthesizer or whatever and connect it to the external audio in, and with this one, you can control the level. All right, so we have the tempo in, and we are almost done right here, the tempo in. And this is, again, the control for this knob for the tempo. And it goes from -5 to +5. At the end of the day, it's just the tempo. So what we do, we just mess with this. And I'm going to be using the velocity knobs just to mess with the tempo knob that we have right there. And I'm going to do the same trick than before. I'm going to disregard the velocity knobs and use them to do something else. And what I want to do, every time that we go to a new step, I want to mess with the tempo. So I'm going to go velocity out and then go to the tempo. I'm going to go down in volume and maybe down on the cutoff and down in tempo. Now remember, we are going to be messing with the tempo with each of the knobs. So I'm going to be going all the way down on all of them. There we go. They're all the way down, and I'm going to be playing this. Now this is the tempo. What happens if I go to one of them, maybe to some of them, and just alter the tempo? Notice that we start to get different rhythms. Again, Now, when you mess with the voltage of the tempo, whatever is that you get right here gets summed. So the position of the tempo really matters. Right? So if I wanted to go faster, but still, get different rhythms, I can. Now maybe I'm gonna make it shorter. And I'm gonna go up in tempo. Right? And just like this, again, you can just create variations of whatever it is that you're doing. Just messing with the tempo. Right. Right, so let's finish with this. We have the run and the stop, and we have the advanced clock. Now, the run and stop is pretty simple. It's going to be this button. If I play it, it runs, and if I tap it again, it stops. So if we plug in something here, and maybe connect it to a different synthesizer, how it works is that when this input receives, and notice that it started because I touched the tip. When it receives a plus 5 volt signal, it means that it will play. It will just start. But when it receives a 0 volt signal, it's going to stop the sequencer. And it works just like, when we use the button. When we stop it, it's going to stop at the current location, and when it plays, it's going to keep playing from that location. Now, the other one is going to be the advanced and the clock. Now, this is the external clock. We can connect maybe a different device and control the tempo. Maybe I'm going to bring again the Roland. And notice that this one has a sync out, and I'm going to be using that one. So I'm using the sync to get it synced with the clock. I'm going to connect it right here. Now, if I play it, I'm going to be playing. Notice it's going super fast. Now, when this one is receiving voltage, whatever I do to the tempo doesn't matter. We disregard the tempo knob. Now, the tempo is being controlled with the Roland 1. If I go down, it's going to go down. So we are controlling the tempo with the Roland 1. Right? But that's what it does. So we disregard the internal clock, and we can use something else. If you have a Mother 32 or something like that, is useful. Alright, so we are done. We covered the main panel and all the ins and the outs. Hopefully you understood everything, and now you can create cool patches. Now, if you liked all of this and you learned something new, please like and subscribe. And if you have the money and maybe you want to say thanks, you can do so. You can go to the links at the description, or you have the QRs at the screen, and you have Patreon, you have PayPal, and you have YouTube Thanks if that's your thing. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.